Welcome. I'm Leanne Meyer. I'm so happy to welcome you to Once a Nurse, the original. My Once a Nurse, Always a Nurse show has been bringing nurse voices out of the shadows and into the world since 2017. In the United States alone, there are 4.5 million nurses who have focused their energies and patient needs and positive health outcomes for decades prior to and during the worst pandemic of our time. I believe it will be nurses and nursing philosophy, along with like minded integrative healthcare partners, who will transform healthcare on every level to one focused on positive health outcomes. My show today, I am so excited for. We're calling the show "Celebrate the Dignity." Celebrating the dignity and honor of nursing. And this is my guest is Bonnie Barnes with Daisy, the award, and the foundation. They have grown so much since they first began. I first met you, or met my guest in July of 2020 when I was introduced by Joe Ty, a mutual friend. And the reason was because of a book that you had just written called Shining the Light on All the Right. And I want to show that here just a minute so that everybody can see what that looks like. It's a beautiful green, bright book. And so was just coming out, and we were just getting started into the pandemic in 2020 in July. We didn't know we were just getting started. We were hoping we were getting to the end. But I read that book in one night, and I cried and I laughed and I felt the power of nursing and the compassion for patients and all of that. It just made me so proud to be able to be a part of that. So I'm so proud today to be able to welcome Bonnie Barnes. Welcome to Once a Nurse.
Thank you, Leanne. It's my honor to be with you. I so enjoy your podcast, and I especially love the title "Once a Nurse," because in our experience, once a nurse, always a nurse is who every nurse is.
And it just touches a deep string in every nurse's heart. When I first started marketing this, the marketer told me that was the dumbest name she could think of, and that I should never use that. And I looked at her, I thought, maybe you're not the marketer for me. So have gone forward from that. One of the things that intrigues me about your story, and I'm going to guess that an awful lot of our listeners do know who you are and know the program that you've been doing, because it's now 23 years that you've been doing this. And the thing that really struck me is that you started this when you and your husband, Mark, who of course is very intimately engaged in this, had already completed. You had retired from advertising and marketing executive background, and you were growing grapes in Sonoma, California. And then this started. So that is what just absolutely amazes me. And for those very few people who may not know the story, tell us about why your whole family is so passionate about nurses. And just share that.
And I will tell you, it took a lot to get me out of the vineyard, because it had become a great passion for me after I retired from advertising. But we had the horrible experience that so many of you nurses are way too familiar with through the eyes of your patients and their families. You can see a picture of Patrick behind me. He was 33 years old, my stepson. He and his wife had just given us our first grandchild 6 weeks before he woke up one morning with some peculiar symptoms and found out he had a dangerously low platelet count, and he was very quickly admitted to the hospital. And Mark and I had the gift. We were retired. We were able to go to Texas, where the family lived, and we could be with him, thinking we'd be there for just a couple of days while he got over this thing we had never heard of, ITP. But what happened was, and I will spare you and your audience the horrible story of those next 8 weeks. At the end of 8 weeks, he passed away. And like so many families that go through this and suddenly it's over, you have to find something to fill that gaping hole in your hearts. And you have to find something to keep the spirit of, in our case, our wonderful Patrick alive.
Yeah.
And as we thought about what we could do that was positive once again, we kept coming back to this incredible experience we'd had with Patrick's nurses. We'd been blessed in our prior lives of never having been exposed to nursing at that level before. But boy, once we were, and we got to see not only how exceptional nurses are from a clinical perspective, but especially how compassionate and sensitive and kind they are. Oh my gosh, we were so filled with gratitude, we needed to find a way to say thank you. So that's what Daisy's all about. It's about a way for us to say thank you to nurses and to enable patients and families and coworkers to share their stories of extraordinary nursing, especially the compassionate side of extraordinary nursing, and then to be able to recognize, elevate, and celebrate nurses who are working at that level. So while DAISY stands for diseases attacking the immune system, to keep us rooted in our experience with Patrick's nurses, it really is now widespread throughout the entire global community of nurses. And we couldn't be more proud.
And not just local, but around the world. That's the thing. You know, there's so many things that spread that are negative, and we often don't hear those positives. It's one of the things that I have been really passionate about myself through this pandemic, is to find out where are those places who are doing healthcare right, who are honoring their nurses, who are respecting and supporting them, because mostly what we've heard the last 3 years has been the opposite. And I guess it surprised me that it's that much apparent that we need to be focusing on what is the right way to support nurses, to support patients. And that's what Daisy is doing. Is so many times nurses feel like nobody knows what we go through. Nobody understands what we're experiencing. And one of the reasons I was so happy with this book is because you tell that story. You really show what it is that nurses do and how they react when they get this reward. Before we go too much further, I wondered if you could read on page 37. There is a quote. You start every chapter with a quote from a nurse, and I wish you would read that for us.
Sure. And now I have to put my glasses on, Leanne.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
No problem. You look great both ways.
Thank you. So, yes, we wanted to be sure to include quotes from nurses throughout the book and stories of nurses throughout the book. And, you know, one of the things that we noticed when Patrick was in the hospital was, as I call it, this thing nurses have for pins. So one of the very first things we created as part of the Daisy Award was a Daisy Award pin, and also a nominee pin for nurses who were nominated for the award. So what this wonderful Megan Mowat says: this little pin can mean so much. It keeps nurses going, pushing, fighting, striving to be better, to do more. Recognition from the people we care for is the steam in our engines. And I just love that quote, and I thank you for elevating it, because I think Megan makes such a good point.
And that is really, I mean, nurses push so hard. They use their energy. They, you know, really move it forward. And it's the patients, the care that they're giving to the patients and the results that they're getting back is what keeps them going. So to have that a reward that's beyond just what they know intrinsically, it's that extrinsic message from cohorts and from patients that says all these wonderful things. So,
if I may, Leanne, what we've learned is that when nurses are receiving this positive feedback that is meaningful and specific to what they have done that's made a difference, it really ties them back to their purpose. It removes all that noise that goes on with all the stuff you all have to deal with, which is incomprehensible to me as not being a nurse. But it takes all that away and reminds you why you became a nurse. And that's truly, I think, the core of what makes Daisy and Meaningful Recognition so special.
Yes, it really is. The other thing you mentioned, that Daisy has spread around the country locally, and I want to mention also around the world. Do you have those stats right in front of you of how far? You don't?
Oh,
okay.
We are coming close to 5,900 healthcare facilities and nursing schools, because, as you know, we have a faculty and student program as well, almost 5,900 partners, not only throughout every state in our country, but in 36 other countries as well. And I think it all comes back to the fact that compassionate care is a universal value of us as human beings. And so whether you're looking at nurses who in Vietnam may have an entirely different scope of practice than they do here in the United States, they're still incredibly compassionate people. And we as receivers of that compassion need to say thank you, no matter where we live or no matter what those nurses are doing for us. So just about 200,000 nurses have been honored so far. But the number that means so much to us is the fact that more than 2.5 million times a patient or a family member or a coworker has stopped and taken the time to share their story of what a nurse has meant to them, of the difference a nurse has made. So we know we are not the only family that needs to say thank you to nurses.
I'm about to be verklempt. That really touches me a lot. This whole aspect of the Daisy Award is just so wonderful from my perspective. I wanted to mention before I forget it, we are having you on because of Nurses Week. This is something we really wanted to celebrate. And you also mentioned that you wanted to celebrate it in a unique way. So this is how we're both coming together and being able to really celebrate again with nurses and for nurses and about nurses. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yes, I can't thank you enough, Leanne, for giving us the forum at this very special time of year, although for us, every year, every week is Nurses Week, every day is Nurses Day. But to thank you for giving us the opportunity to use this forum to remind nurses of how special you are, to express our gratitude on behalf of all the patients and families you serve, many of whom probably don't get a chance to say thank you because they are going through something that is no doubt traumatic for them. It may be terrible, it may be joyful if a baby is born or a recovery is happening, but we as patients and families truly, truly, truly value you. And to have a chance to say that and share that message with your audience, Leanne, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. I know that you're honoring nurses everywhere. You mentioned also it's nursing students, it's teams, it's faculty, it's leaders, it's nurses, individual nurses, it's teams, it's all of that. And I know that in January, you just introduced a new application for Daisy for ethics in practice and leadership. And I'd like you to talk about that.
Sure. So throughout the pandemic, as we were reading nominations for the Daisy Award, we got a chance to see yet another aspect of how nurses think. And the whole concept through these nominations of how nurses are making decisions and the boldness and the courage that they were being forced to deal with at the time of the pandemic just got our attention. And so we got together with one of our board members, Stuart Downs, who's a nurse leader in Georgia, who I know has a great passion and expertise in the area of ethics. And I was brainstorming with him, and he said, we need to take this to the American Nurses Association, talk to Cinda Rushton and Liz Stokes and Nelda Godfrey. They are among the leaders of ANA's Center for Nursing Ethics and Human Rights. Let's go to them and see if there's something we can put together with them that helps us remind nurses that in practicing according to their values, with their boldness and their voices and their advocacy, they're practicing in line with the ANA's Code of Nursing Ethics. Well, this is way new to me. And to think that we had anything to do with an organization that is even related to human rights was, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So we sat down with those wonderful nurse leaders who are all ethicists and talked to them about what we wanted to do, which was to create another application of Daisy that really enabled our healthcare partners to evaluate the nurses who are being nominated and think about what they were doing from a standpoint of ethical practice and leadership, and look at those bold decisions they're making and supporting them by recognizing those bold decisions. And so that's what we're doing. And the program is just now beginning to roll out. As you said, it started in January. The nominations we're seeing are not only touching, but but profoundly meaningful for what nurses are being called on to do and how nurses are thinking. And again, I don't think nurses even think about the code of ethics. I'm sure you learn it in nursing school, right?
Yeah.
But when you stop and read it now, and you look at what nurses do just so naturally in delivering on their values, it's just powerful. So we're doing everything we can to elevate that and help nurses think about how special it is to be the most trusted profession because you practice according to this code of ethics.
Bonnie, I'm wondering, through the pandemic, nurses have finally been able to come out of the shadows and have been featured more. We more than just those people who are related to nurses or love nurses or are nurses, are really beginning to have a little more idea of what exactly it is that nurses do. But one thing that was pointed out to me by a CNO, a chief nursing officer, is that they are now in the shadows. And I'm wondering if this ethics award is applicable to them. They have had to do some phenomenally difficult things to take care of their nurses and to make sure patients are being cared for.
And that's why the ethics award is both for practice and for leadership.
Great.
You couldn't be more right. Thank you for highlighting that, because when I've read some of the stories and talked to a number of nurse leaders about, was this the right thing for us to do? And of course, we got this major endorsement of doing it from our community. But some of the things that I listened to, what nurse leaders were being forced, decisions they were being forced to make during the pandemic and beyond. I mean, it's not just in that terrible time, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
So yes, we're very happy the fact that this can go to leaders, it can go to nurses in practice as well. And leaders in general, we've spent the last year, and we will continue to elevate DAISY recognition for nurse leaders in general, because throughout the pandemic, we looked at the American Organization for Nursing Leadership's research on what was happening for leaders during the pandemic, and we saw particularly the role of nurse manager was really beaten up.
Yes.
And nobody realized, we didn't know anything, frankly, really understand or appreciate what that role is about, but every nurse leader I talk to says that role of manager is the toughest one in the building. So with AONL, last year, we partnered on a program called Beyond Gratitude, a tribute to nurse managers. And part of that was to encourage all of our healthcare organization partners to ensure that they brought the DAISY Nurse Leader Award in to shine a light on the work that managers are doing. And what's happened is that their teams get a chance to say thank you to them and express their gratitude in a way to describe and give feedback to their managers, who so often their feedback is, a sign on the wall, a chart of the infections in the unit, or the falls in the unit, or the bad things in the unit, right? But here we have managers who are hearing from their teams a way of what they mean to them in such a personal way. Oh my gosh, it's been a thrill to see these wonderful leaders being celebrated and what it means to them. I equate the way their teams talk about them just like the way patients talk about the nurses who take care of them.
It's something that seems very common sense to me, but I'm amazed at how many people I say it to and they don't have any idea what I'm talking about. And that is, there is no more relational career than healthcare. If we do not have a relationship with the people we're working with the people who are leading us, with the patients that we're dealing with, it can't work. It just simply cannot work. And so I feel like you get right to the heart of what nursing is about, where so many times the general public thinks that nursing is about tasks and doing things. And even we find that people at the organizational corporations that are running some of these organizations don't really get the finesse, the time it takes to listen, to care, to do that extra thing that just gives that one person, or maybe that person and their family, a little more hope that day. And oftentimes nurses will say, well, I wasn't doing anything special. I just was doing my job. And we really think that.
Yeah. Well, we make a big point of encouraging the C-suite to come to Daisy Award presentations and remind them why they do what they do every day, that life is not about a spreadsheet or a board meeting, that life in a healthcare facility is about what's going on between nurses and patients, because we as patients go to hospitals for nursing care,
Yeah,
right? So
exactly.
it's so important, and we really make a strong push to make sure that everyone in the C-suite is going to those Daisy presentations and hearing the stories of what their nurses are doing every day.
There has been a big push to look at healthcare as more of a business. And I keep telling people again, reminding them that if healthcare is a business, then the product that's being sold or the what is being accomplished is truly, sorry, I was distracted by the award. Um, what we're selling is the care, the compassion, the being there, holding the hand. The nurse is the person who is there 24/7, 365. And so that is really what brings people back again and again and again. Um,
Right.
just doing tasks is not
Hmm.
what really helps people change their lives at phenomenal times in their life. Since this is up, do you want to speak a little bit to this award that you wrote?
But if I may, I also want to comment that don't you think when you get that right, when you get the relationships right, the business
Yes,
follows? The
yes,
business will follow when you get the care right.
absolutely right.
That may be, with apologies to the chief executive officers of the world, that may be a very naive approach, but I think that's true in so many businesses. And I come from the world of business, that when you get it right, that everything follows. So yes, this beautiful piece of art. When we started the Daisy Award 23 years ago, we really wanted to find a gift to give to our Daisy honorees that symbolized the unique relationship, that bond that nurses and patients have with each other, and that flow of care that happens, and it goes both ways. So we found this beautiful piece of art in Zimbabwe, where the Shona people are historically brilliant stone carvers, and it's a great tradition for them. So this is a classic Shona design, and it's made out of serpentine stone. And we now are engaged with 22 artists in Zimbabwe who work for us full time and are carving their hearts out with these beautiful pieces of art. And everyone it's the same design, but each piece has its own character. The stone is different. Each one is hand signed by one of our artists. The best thing to me, the economy and the politics of Zimbabwe have been broken for decades now. And we're able to support not only these artists, but they in turn support hundreds of people in their community and their families.
Yes.
That's just the work of nurses reaching around the world, taking care of people they'll never meet.
Exactly. When I look at this award as a nurse, and again, it really touches my heart that I'm hoping I don't break here, but what I see is the flow of the nurse into the patient and the patient back into the nurse, both at the bottom and in the arms.
Yes.
It is a connection that is so deep and spiritual. It really is. There are many, many patients that I felt a spiritual connection with. Those are patients that never leave my mind. It may be I've been a nurse now for 50 years, and there are still people that were back in my nursing school days that I still remember and will never forget.
And they'll never forget you either, Leanne. I know that's true. I know that's true. Yes,
While we're
you're right. It does go both ways. And it's so important that we connect, we bring those patients back who've written Daisy nominations. Number one, they need to know what happened to their nomination. It
Yes.
shouldn't go into a black hole. They just poured their hearts out, right?
Yes.
And they
Yes.
want to know what happened to it. But when they come in for the Daisy award ceremony, that reconnection with their patient makes with their nurse rather, makes a world of difference to them.
Yes.
It's a real sense of synergy that goes on.
And I would think that would be the same also with nurse to nurse, leader to nurse. I mean, all of the different directions that those connections make. So while we're still on this, the healer's touch, maybe I can just read quickly. This is another chapter lead in of Michelle Robinson is saying, Having received the Daisy Award reminds me that there are these people out there who do understand. It makes the hard days easier. I see the healer's touch on my dresser, and I know the day is going to be okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Walking to work or going into work, having that in your heart cannot help but change the day that you lead.
Yeah.
So very, very important. I'm curious, because you're seeing nurses all around the world, do you see many differences between nurses in various countries, or what are the similarities that you see?
Well, as I said earlier, compassion is a universal quality that we see in nurses everywhere, no matter what their scope of practice or their skill set may be, or their education, whatever. That's common. It's a calling everywhere. There is a love for humanity everywhere, and I think that's the universal thing we've seen, and doesn't really surprise us. It's just who nurses are. Um, Differences are more clinical for sure. I will tell you, we spent quite a lot of time in the Middle East, and we've been privileged to be invited there 3 or 4 times over the last several months. And we see this incredible joy in the work there. The celebrations, I often laugh about the fact that when we go to a celebration in Saudi Arabia or the UAE, there are no more balloons in the country. They're all at the Daisy Award. Right? They put on a magnificent show.
Hold them
Yeah,
apart. You can say hello.
just the joy of it is so beautiful, because they're very artistic and wonderful people. But yeah, I think that there's a lot more that holds nursing together than there is that separates it. I think the differences are more on the clinical side, which I know very little about, because my focus is so much on the compassionate side and the art of nursing.
And I think that is why I feel so strongly that, when you think of the number of nurses around the world, I don't know this for a fact, but I have to assume it is probably the number one career held mostly by women. In the United States, it's still about 85% are still women. The men that come into the profession bring wonderful levels of their own compassion, their own knowledge, their own self to the care of patients. So it just makes me feel that the number of nurses around the world, this is what's going to change healthcare, change the world. If we can bring that perspective forward, not behind the screen somewhere, but really out in the open so that people can understand it's a much better world when we're supporting and encouraging one another than it is when we're denigrating and harming each other.
Of course, of
Yeah.
course. But we also, and in doing that, need to obviously increase the number of nurses we have, and
Yes.
use whatever tools we have to make sure people know being a nurse is a fabulous career, not only in acute care and in direct care with patients and families, but in every aspect of nursing. I am amazed at all the things that nurses can do, whether it's in direct care, or it's in the corporate world, or sitting on boards of directors. I mean, just
Yes.
the education of nurses and the way you all think you can do anything and have a great career.
Yeah, there was a goal with nurses around, especially nursing leaders around the country a few years ago, to have a nurse in every boardroom. And I don't mean just healthcare. I mean every boardroom, whether
Yes.
it's, people building buildings, or, whatever it is that company is doing. With a nurse in the boardroom, it's going to bring a perception that often does not come to a normal business-like boardroom. And I feel like that's still true. The other part of it is I really feel like we have gone away from managing or helping people to be healthy. We focus much more on chronic and, the end of life kinds of things, and the tragedies of life, where every nurse I talk to, especially every nurse in ICU, CCU, will tell me that could have been prevented. That could have been prevented. And those are some of the nurses who are now going into advanced practice, the doctorates in nursing practice. and they want to go out and take that role that to a large extent doctors have had to delegate or let go of because they have such high costs in their training that they can't afford to do the in-depth kind of work that it takes, the holistic work that it takes. And that is the perfect opportunity for nurses, because that's what we're trained. That's what we love to do. We want to just not see. Sometimes I'll hear doctors talk about holism in healthcare, and what they mean is this system, this system, all of these different parts of the body that then they're saying they're pulling together as a whole. But nurses are looking at that whole as an integration of that person, not separate parts of their body, but really their spiritual aspects, the way their body works, the way their mind works, all of those things, and then the relationships that they have also. And many times, just in talking and hearing a patient really go into depth, you can find out things like somebody coming in with gastric ulcers. It may not be a medication they need, but someone to hear that their spouse just died 6 months ago, and they've been really in pain in every way possible ever since. I'm wondering if you mentioned education, and one of the things we keep saying is we need more nurses, we need more nurses. But there's millions of nurses who are applying to nursing school and can't get in because there aren't enough nurse training, professors, etc. And I'm wondering if you're hearing anything more from the nurse educators about bringing in, again, maybe the associate nurses, some of the nursing levels that perhaps we weren't using before. Is that something that you're hearing? And maybe MSN nurses being able to train clinical, those people who have been doing it for 40 years.
Right. Well, a couple of things that you're touching on. Number one, absolutely, we are hearing our community colleges are doing a great job educating associate degree nurses. We love our relationship with the Organization for Associate Degree Nursing and learning from them about the role of ADN nursing. And of course, ultimately they do go on to BSNs, but it allows them to get into the workforce more quickly and completely competently. And of course, they've got the heart of a nurse. So we're certainly seeing that. And I think that your point about primary care, I love my nurse practitioner and have always, when I've had to make a change because the nurse practitioner has gone on to do something else, I'm always looking for another one, because you're right. It's certainly much more holistic approach to healthcare that I think is how we all benefit.
We're coming to the end of our time here, and I'm always reluctant to look at the clock and say, no, not yet. I'm wondering if there's something that just stands out to you right now in the last year, the last several years, something that has really touched or excited you or encouraged you about what nurses bring to the world of healthcare, but bring to the world, period. What is it that you've heard?
Yeah, I think we've touched on quite a lot of that. I mean, just the more I learn about nursing, the more, here goes my husband, the more we learn about the role that nurses play in our society. And it is so important for our public to pay attention to what nurses are and who nurses are. During the pandemic, we launched a campaign to generate more nominations for nurses from the public using our old tools in advertising, because we know the public needs to sit back and think about this role in our society and express our gratitude to nurses. So, what excites me is that is happening. What excites me is that nurses are saying less and less, I didn't do anything special. I used to joke that where in the nursing curriculum are you taught to say that? But I'm hearing it less and less. I think that nurses are starting to get the fact that they are making a difference. And that's why we're seeing, and leaders are seeing the incredible importance of meaningful recognition in a healthy work environment. And that's improving.
That's fantastic.
So that's why we're seeing this incredible growth of the Daisy Award. And it's through no fault of our own. It's really because nurses and leaders are getting it and understanding that this feedback needs to be felt by every nurse.
I think you also need to take credit that there is something about where this came from your hearts, and you so sincerely put it out there to hearts that embraced it, understood it, and were tremendously grateful, and like our reading before said, just pushed us forward to keep doing what we're doing, regardless of what anybody says about it.
Yeah.
So I hate to say goodbye to you. I hope you'll say hello to Mark for me.
I will do it.
Him. I know he is a very quiet person, so even when he's on the show, sometimes he is pretty quiet. But he certainly has had a phenomenal part of building this organization to what it is. The other thing I wanted to mention is that you have a conference going on in June. Tanya and I are promoting Power Up Nursing, which is one of the reasons we're doing this also, is we want to support nurses to come and find their dream, resurrect a dream they had before, share a dream with somebody else that maybe they wouldn't have even thought of. So that's what we're doing in June, the week after you, the 22nd to the 24th. But you are going to be doing something in London. Say more about that.
Actually, it's in Coventry, England, and we are doing, it is our second International Daisy Day conference, and the theme of it is Why Nurses Stay. And we're partnering with a wonderful organization called NAME UK, which is Nurses in Midwifery Excellence in the UK, which is a kind of a collaboration of all kinds of chief nurses from all over the country. So the conference will not only be in person at Coventry University on June 16th, but then it will be recorded, and the following week or 10 days later, it will be available for streaming and for CE units around the world. So we're very excited about that.
Are you going to send that out to every nurse leader across the country and every hospital? I hope so. Because
absolutely.
I feel like I was an OB nurse and a labor and delivery nurse. And one of the things I noticed with husbands who would be not very helpful was that they didn't know what to do. And when I could show them and tell them what they could do, they were right in there wanting to do it, because then they knew what would help. And I think that might be the case for an awful lot of people who are at the top of their game, perhaps, and don't really understand the people that are doing the work that creates their business.
Yeah, so we will be promoting it everywhere as we did last year. We had a tremendous response last year. We were based in Abu Dhabi and had thousands of nurses tune in to the recorded version afterward. And, free CE units doesn't hurt, but it was a wonderful message. So we've got great speakers. We're very excited about it.
Send me the link. We'll make sure it gets out to more nurses yet.
And for your conference as well.
Yes, thank you. So we will end this particular session with Bonnie Barnes, and she is here representing her baby. Basically, you guys, you and Mark and your whole family really developed this and has grown it as a family event. So it's the Daisy Foundation and the Daisy Award system. So thank you so very much. And I want to just end with a quote. I long loved a saying that says, opportunity is cleverly disguised as impossible situations. Nurses have never been more uniquely placed for healthcare transformation, with advanced practice nurses gradually achieving full practice authority in more states every year. I believe nurses will change the face of healthcare. Thank you.
I'm right there with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, to you. Well, you too, because you will definitely be celebrating it. I also want to thank our producer, Tanya Abreu, who is a friend and has just been amazing. And she's been doing this producing for me so that I can actually do this show again. I'm very pleased.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Bye-bye.